Hello, good evening, and welcome back. It's your favorite school psychologist, teacher Nwaebiem. I believe in training teachers who are mentally aware. Seriously, a whole lot goes into what we do in the classroom, and one of that is our emotions. If we are mentally aware, if you're emotionally intelligent, believe me, a lot of the problems we have, especially in our classroom management, will be sorted out. So that is why we are committed to our Friday webinars. Last week we talked about understanding triggers. See, there is no how you can be emotionally intelligent or emotionally aware if you don't understand what triggers you. I told you people a story about how I used to be this teacher that flips at the slightest provocation. But since my emotional awareness journey, I was able to regulate myself. So a lot that goes into classroom management is basically emotional issues. And we find out that when we sort out these emotional issues, a teaching and learning will be effective. But that's all for last week. So that's all for this week, this particular week. So this Friday webinar is targeted towards our next week activities and tasks. And the topic we'll be handling today and for next week is communication in the classroom. This is very important. Communication is the heartbeat of everything that happens in the classroom. Learning, relationship, building relationship, a lot of communication goes into classroom activities, it goes into teaching and learning. So that is why it is very important. Every interaction, both verbal, non-verbal, formal, non-formal, or informal, is that we engage in the classroom shapes how our students learn. It shapes how they connect, and it shapes how they grow. So effective communication between teacher and student, teacher, student is very important. It helps to create a climate of trust, respect, and engagement in the class. So this is a very important aspect. So if you are that teacher that don't know, that finds that face a challenge in passing information, eliciting the right response from your learners, this particular webinar and next week activities for you. I want you to take it so serious. So one of our desire is that by the end of next week, we get to know what effective communication is all about and be able to implement strategies, even if it means looking deep down within ourselves and the way we have been handling communication in the class, even if it means doing that to know how we are going to make some changes here and there. But let's just know that this is very important. So, what then is communication? When we talk about communication, I normally tell people that communication is a two-way thing. Well, let's look at the meaning of communication. Classroom communication refers to exchange of information, thoughts, and feelings that occur in teaching and learning environment. See, if you look at this particular definition, you will find out that it's not just exchange of information alone, because I know that there are some teachers that they stand in front of the class, they run through their lessons, the contents and everything, and that is just it for them. See, it is not just about information, it's not just about content, it's part of it, but that is not all there is to it. In effective communication, we are communicating information, we are communicating thoughts. See, you need to understand that a whole lot about of your ideologies, your belief rubs off on your students, on your learners. So we're exchanging not just information, we're exchanging thoughts. We're also exchanging feelings. See, See, you know what they used to say about a happy mother and a happy home? See, a happy teacher, a happy class, a sad teacher, a sad class, a moody teacher, a moody class, a dysregulated teacher is a dysregulated class. All these things are what we pass across when we stand to communicate in our dealings with our learners. So communication is exchanging information, is changing thoughts, is changing feelings. And again, one thing we have to understand is that communication is not a one-way thing. That is why the chalkboard method does not work. That is why the traditional method of education, the traditional method of teaching is not really that effective. So, effective communication requires I talk and I receive feedback. And I want to say this: it is left for you to talk. Sometimes it's not about you who is passing the information, the thought and feeling. It's also about the person you are talking to, how the person perceives what you are saying. That is one thing about trauma-informed teaching. Most times, you are doing what you are actually ought to do, but the person you are trying to get to may perceive it in a way. So, in case of that, how will I put it, misunderstanding, communication requires that you take the necessary step to get the person to the point where they understand what actually you want to pass across, so that the feedback that you are eliciting from them will be the right one and the proper one. So these are all the dynamics that are involved in communication. So in classroom communication, a whole lot of things goes into classroom communication. One is the verbal communication, the written and spoken words, your lectures, the discussions, the questions, the feedbacks, and the assignments. These are the verbal communication. These ones are orally articulated or written. Well, let's talk about the non-verbal communication. That's the tone of your voice, the gestures, your facial expressions, eye contact, and the classroom environment as a whole. We don't look at that aspect. There are some classes you go into, you actually pick up what the teacher is all about, what the classroom is all about, the atmosphere in the classroom. And I would say, when we talk about tips on how to communicate effectively, you will see how to create that classroom environment that communicates well. That is, if that is a symbol of effective communication. After the non-verbal communication, we have the paraverbal communication cues. That's how something is said. It is not about what you said. It is not only about what you said. It is also about how you said what you said. I can tell somebody, excuse me. I can also tell somebody, excuse me. You see these two things. Or let me put it this way. I can tell somebody, excuse me, and I can also tell somebody, excuse me. These are two different, the same phrase, but two different, will I say, tone, pitch, facial expression, and emphasis to it. So the way these two phrases will be perceived by the listener will be very different. So it's not just for you to say, this is not what I mean. But the way you said it actually matters. That is what para-verbal communication is all about. Then visual communication, these our visual aids, our use of the visual aids like charts and the things like that for our teaching. That's our instructional materials. So that is it. So we have the verbal communication, the non-verbal, the paraverbal, and the visual communication. Then effective classroom management is a two-way thing. I've said it before. It's a two-way thing. It's not only about delivering information, but also about listening, understanding, and responding appropriately. So it's expected that when I talk, the other person listens, or when I communicate, the other person listens, and the person gives me feedback. And when the person gives me feedback, I listen and also give feedback. So that's what effective classroom communication is all about. So in a setting where you have the teacher only talking and there is no response or feedback, something is wrong in that kind of environment. So effective classroom communication is very important. Of course, it is very important. It enhances understanding and retention. If we communicate clearly, it helps students to grasp the concept we are trying to talk about and the instructions more easily. So I've been in a situation where I was supervising a particular teacher. She was asking a question, but because her question was not worded clearly, there was a kind of ambiguity in her question. The question was so ambiguous. The learners couldn't give her the right response. So sometimes ask yourself, if the learners are not getting this thing, can I change how I am communicating this to them? If they are not understanding the words I say verbally, can I dramatize as visual communication? Can I dramatize? Can I gesticulate? Because I find out that, for example, I've seen this particular teacher, he just stands in class, carries the notebook, and he's reading. There is no gestures, nothing like that, and you expect the learners to understand you. Gestures and things like that, body language are kind of support to the verbal communication, and it helps students to understand better. So if you are effective communication helps in understanding and retention. It promotes engagement. If the communication lines are open, if the learners are if they are comfortable, if the classroom environment is inclusive, it fits, how will I put it? If it's accepting, there will be what? There will be participation. They'll be able to participate in the class if they know that, okay, when I share my perspective, the teacher, I will not be ridiculed, I will not be shamed, I will not be shushed. It will help them to engage more. So effective communication helps, it enhances engagement, it promotes engagement. Another thing it does again is that it supports emotional development. So when students feel heard, when they feel respected, their confidence and sense of belonging increases. One thing about effective communication is that in effective communication there is respect. Respect is communicated. It's not an environment where you shut the learners down. In such an environment, they'll lose confidence. They lose sense of belonging. And that's why if you're now trying to elicit a kind of response from them, you don't get it. So give them that environment, make them understand by modeling it to them, by showing them, by being patient. Very good. By being patient with them when you are communicating, it shows them that they are important. It shows them they are respected, and if they feel respected, they will be willing to engage more. And one thing that also shows them that they are respected is active listening. Not when they are talking to you, you are doing another thing, you are not paying attention, you don't want to hear, and things like that. How will you expect them to be open, to trust, and to engage in your lesson? So it also prevents misunderstanding and conflict. When clarity, when what you are communicating, when the information you want to pass is very clear, there will be no ambiguity, no misunderstanding, no conflict. So it minimizes confusion. There are so many barriers, there are so many things that challenges effective communication in the classroom, and that is I can give you a few. One of them is language or cultural barrier. When you have a class that has a lot of where your learners come from different cultural backgrounds, especially when they are, how will I put it? I remember I used to have a girl in my class who comes from the core north. Not be she's not fluent in English language. It took us a lot of time. It took us time to adapt, to teach her, to bring her to that level where she can understand. So these are one of the challenges. And if you are not patient enough, you can't do that. If you're not patient enough, you can't do that. Another thing is emotional distress. A child that is distressed, even you as an educator, if you are in distress, you are anxious, or a child that have low self-esteem, or you too, that if you have low self-esteem, you will not be able to communicate effectively. Every objection becomes an attack. I think there was it last time I had a case of this teacher that whenever the children, okay, he teaches mathematics, whenever the children tries to correct him on an error, no, you don't do that, things like that. No, it was so obvious, so glaring that he's not teachable and probably lacks self-esteem. So that's it. So over reliance on one-way communication, we should be very, very careful, especially when we are on a tight schedule. I have this so and so number, it's so and so hour to finish this particular thing. Then you now rush through it like trailers without break. That is not it. It challenges effective communication. A one way communication is not communication at all. So poor listening habits from either party. For example, a child that is challenged, a hyperactive child, a child that was not taught to listen, a child that an autistic child, things like that. These are some challenges, some disorder that might affect listening skill. And again, we adults, if we are not emotionally intelligent, if we don't have that active listening skill, it impacts on effective communication and it hinders effective communication. Another thing is environmental distraction like noise, seating arrangement, poor classroom management. It affects effective communication. So these are some of the strategies that we can use for us teachers. We have to foster an open and inclusive climate. See, if the students or the learners are not safe and comfortable, if they don't feel safe and they are not comfortable expressing their ideas without fear of ridicule or being shut down and everything. It's that particular environment hinders effective communication. There's something I normally do at the end of the term. I normally ask my students which area, you see, give them opportunity to criticize you. Constructive criticism is allowed. Which area didn't I do well? Things like that. And give them opportunity to point out areas that they don't understand. And I used to have this teacher in secondary school. She would be the one to ask you, what are the areas you don't understand in this topic, and you will now you will answer so area, and she will now be the one. This is because you were not listening. Do you think that I would want to ask her, or I would want to answer that question again? So, foster an open and inclusive climate where students ask questions, where they express their ideas, express their concern without fear of being ridiculed or shamed or shut down. In that kind of environment, effective communication thrives. So be clear and concise. See, simplify instructions and check for understanding. When you give an activity, when you give an instruction, be clear. Remove every form of ambiguity and check if they understood you. Then another one is active listening. Show genuine interest in students' thoughts. Use paraphrasing and nonverbal cues to show them attention. See, this active listening is very important because we have a lot of adults who don't listen. Most times we listen to answer. We don't even listen to understand. So we should show genuine interest. Sometimes we are in class, we are present, but we are not present. We are not giving them the how will I put it, the cue that we are paying attention. That's very wrong. So we have to practice active listening. Try and understand where a child is coming from, where a learner is coming from. Sometimes they ask questions, and that question is not even the real problem. There are other problems to it. But if you will listen actively, if we really listen, we'll understand where the problem is coming from. So, and again, use body language. Smile in class. Maintain eye contact. You're not fighting with anybody. You're not fighting with anybody. Be free. Be relaxed. Let them know you are relaxed. And once you are relaxed, remember it rubs off on your learners. Then provide constructive feedback. You see this one? Most teachers don't know how to provide constructive feedback. They will tear down a learner's work. Oh, this is not how it's done. Please, let's not be that type of teacher. There is a way to give feedback. Start from strength. Look at the good first. Praise their process. If they are trying, tell them they are trying. Encourage them first. Then in between that encouragement, sandwich your feedback. You see, they'll be more willing to open up and communicate. That's what communication is all about. Then again, encourage student voice. Encourage your learners to speak out. Use things like discussion. Every day is not for lecture. Use things like discussion, think, back, share, classroom forums. And one thing I normally do very well is seminar, where students gather on a particular, one or two persons share about it, share their perspective on a particular topic. Others ask them questions, they answer, things like that. Encourage students' voice. It's one way to facilitate effective communication. Again, adapt to different learning and communication styles. See, your learners don't learn the same way. They don't learn the same way. That is why we use a lot of instructional materials, communication styles, and the rest. I remember a particular topic we wanted to talk about. I had to come with my equipment. We watched a documentary on that. Fast forward to when I gave them their midterm test, they did very well. That's one thing, visual communication. So infuse a lot of learning and communication styles. It helps. Then the last but not the least, model respectful communication. See, that thing you want to achieve in your students starts with you. It actually starts with you. If you want them to learn empathy, demonstrate it. Learn to treat them that same way. Learn to understand, trying to understand them. Patience, things like that, civility. You can't be a teacher that talks crass and you expect your learners to talk otherwise, to do otherwise. You can't be a teacher with no atom of civility and you expect your learners to be civil in communication. So, whatever you want your learners to do, whatever you want them, remember we are models. Whatever we do, it rubs off on them. So, model respectful communication. Respect them, respect their thoughts. There's what we call perspective taking, understand them, see from their perspective. It might not actually be what you want, but see from their perspective first, then bring in your own. It shows them you respect them. And when you are modeling that respect, they have no choice than to do what? To give it back to you. So that is what it is for communication. So next week we are starting off with our tasks on Monday, our personal reflection and our student corners and things like that, the activities. I encourage you. Our desire is that by Friday next week, we'll get to understand what communication is all about. It's true that Rome wasn't built in a day. You might not learn or imbibe all these things at once, but once you put it into your consciousness, you begin to understand, you begin to abide, you begin to live by it. So that's our aim. That's our aim. That's what we are going for next week. Let's be teachers that communicate effectively. Let's be teachers that inspire effective communication in our students. Thank you very much. And please, if you have not subscribed to this channel, I want to encourage you, subscribe, like, and share. Let other teachers know that there is a community where we want to be better, not just for ourselves, but for our learners. Thank you very much. And see you next Friday. Bye.